Got a little bit of a surprise this afternoon as it was announced Aaron Rodgers went on the Joe Rogan podcast that was released earlier today. So when that came out, I very quickly skimmed through the entire 3-hour episode, and I got my takeaways for you guys on today's edition of Steelers Talk. But before we get into it here and we get into the latest surrounding Aaron Rodgers, make sure you guys click that subscribe button, because when and if Aaron Rodgers signs with the Pittsburgh Steelers, we will be rushing to go live on this channel for a massive party here on Steelers Talk to celebrate the newest QB1 here in Pittsburgh. And hey, if you're tired of all the Rodgers talk and you don't want to listen to the latest updates on Rodgers today, we actually put out a video earlier that has nothing to do with Aaron Rodgers. So you can check out that video after today's show, or if you just don't want to hear about Aaron Rodgers, period, today, we did put out a video earlier today not talking about Rodgers. So check out that video if you don't want Rodgers content today. But as I said, guys, I went through the entire 3-hour conversation about an hour and a half ago, and throughout the entire 3 hours of conversation between Rodgers and Rogan, they did not talk about football for 1 minute of it, all right? It was a lot of talk about the COVID vaccines and aliens and all this different stuff that, Trump and Elon and all this different stuff that, Rodgers loves to talk about politically speaking. But I think he probably told Rogan before he went on, he's like, listen, man, I don't want to get into my free agency or anything like that. I don't even want to talk about football. I just want to talk about what's going on in the world and my take on that. And he certainly had a lot to say. 3 hours is a pretty long conversation, but none of it was football related, which of course means he didn't give any updates in terms of the status of when or if he's going to sign with the Pittsburgh Steelers this offseason. But we did get one nugget, and it has to do with the quote-unquote personal issues that he alluded to when he went on the Pat McAfee show a couple of weeks back. And this was the exact quote of they were talking about some stuff, certain things that cause cancer. And he says, I've been in the weeds with these people who are close to me that have cancer. So essentially he disclosed on Rogan this week here that the part of what the personal issues that he's been dealing with this offseason, and he doesn't feel comfortable signing with an NFL team before these things are resolved, is that he's dealing with certain people in his life that are very close to him that are suffering from cancer. And, that's very unfortunate. Obviously, we don't know the extent to their cancer. We don't know if it's terminal. We don't know if it's, that they're fighting it right now or whatever the case may be. But obviously, that seems to be a pretty valid explanation for, your mind not being ready to completely lock in on an NFL football season. And, if he completely misses OTAs this year because he feels like he still needs to attend to the people that are close to him that are dealing with this really tough time in their life, then it would be understandable to me. Now, would I love him to be at Steelers OTAs this year, which start next Tuesday, by the way? Absolutely. Would I love him to be there for mandatory minicamp, which begins on June 10th? Absolutely. I think the more time that he spends with the Steelers, building a connection with his new center, Zach Frazier, building a connection with the receivers in the Steelers wide receiver room, the more Arthur Smith can get a feel for him as a quarterback and Rodgers can get a feel for Art as a play caller, I think the more bugs that you can work out in OTAs, the better before you hopefully hit the ground running when you get to Latrobe and Steelers training camp in late July. But a big question that is popping up here, because cancer is a pretty big deal here, guys, and it's certainly possible that, especially if they're fighting this thing, it's not a guarantee that this situation is going to be resolved by the start of the NFL season. So the question that is on a lot of people's minds right now is, will this situation with the people in Aaron's life that are dealing with cancer, unfortunately, and by the way, our hearts go out to him and the people that are close to the people that are dealing with this illness. Cancer is really a tough thing to be going through. Especially if there's people in your life that you're close to that are dealing with it. But could it prevent Rodgers from signing with Pittsburgh at all this offseason if the situation doesn't improve? And I think the answer to that question is it certainly has the potential to get that way, especially if things get worse and, things get, start to get to a point where Rodgers could be losing people close to him because of this disease. If that's what happens, then that sucks, and the Steelers will probably have to look in another direction especially if Rodgers just doesn't feel like he's in the mental space to play football in 2025. But I will say, I do think that he will play this year. And according to his biographer, Ian O'Connor, he says that he has a pretty good feel of what the situation is, and he thinks that Rodgers will sign by the end of the month of May. This is what O'Connor, his biographer, had to say about the situation. I'm not doing consistent day-to-day reporting on his life, but I have occasionally reached out. The sense I got was, I think I have a pretty good sense of what his quote-unquote personal issues are, and I don't think it's something that would prevent him from playing football. I just think verbally, because the scenes are behind the scenes, not that he guaranteed it, but he's told the Steelers, listen, I'm going to play for you. I just don't want to go there and then miss part of mandatory minicamp because of my personal issues. I'm pretty sure they're going to be solved by the end of May, at least in my satisfaction, where I can give you my all. So that's where I think he is. He knows it was an embarrassment in New York largely, and he's the face of that embarrassment. Whether that's fair or not, that's the case. It may be me as an optimist, but I think this is going to work out. Do I think the Steelers will win the Super Bowl next year? No. But if you told me 11-6 with at least one playoff victory, I think that's realistic. And then not only does Ian O'Connor think that it's in play for Rodgers to sign within the next week or at least before the month of May, but Adam Schefter from ESPN said today on Wisconsin radio that he says it's quote-unquote on the table for Rodgers to sign within the next 7 days. This is what Schefter had to say. We've heard Art Rooney II, the team owner, say he expects Aaron Rodgers to sign there, and they have mandatory minicamp June 10th to the 12th. So I would think that Rodgers is on the table here in the next week or so. And then also Mike Florio, who claims to have a source on Rodgers, who says that he would be quote-unquote surprised if Rodgers isn't there for when the Steelers OTAs begin next week, Tuesday. So very, very shortly. This is what Mike Florio had to say. This year, the Steelers' mandatory minicamp is June 10th through the 12th, but the Steelers only have 6 OTA days before the mandatory minicamp. Teams can have up to 10. I think he will be there the next Tuesday, May 27th, when Phase 3 begins. That's 9 practices before training camp. That's enough time to get properly ensconced. I think he's gonna. I don't know this, but I think there's going to be a press conference this week, and he'll be there with the team next Tuesday. I'll be surprised if he's not. So my take on this entire situation, guys, is that, at this stage in the game, who knows when Aaron Rodgers will sign with the Pittsburgh Steelers and whether if he will sign. Because, if this situation with the cancer, turns out to be quite dangerous for the people close to him in his life, and he feels like mentally speaking he just can't give his all to an NFL team, and he might just decide not to play this year and just decide to retire. And honestly, that would be a more than understandable thing, especially if this stuff gets to be pretty darn bad. But I do think that based on what Ian O'Connor, his biographer, is saying, who says that he has a pretty good sense of the situation, he thinks Rodgers is going to be able to play this year, and he thinks that he's going to be able to sign with the Pittsburgh Steelers relatively soon. It seems like the other people that are kind of monitoring the situation and how the Steelers feel about this, it certainly seems like the Steelers expect Rodgers to sign at this point. And if the Steelers felt like this situation was going to end with Aaron Rodgers choosing retirement, they probably would have already moved on. They would have gone in another direction at this point, as opposed to continue to wait for Aaron Rodgers at this point in the offseason. Now, I will say anything is possible. Rodgers could absolutely still retire and, go be Joe Rogan's podcast host or, co-host for all I know. He certainly seemed to be enjoying himself talking about all the different stuff that they talked about on that show today. But it certainly seems like the people close to Rodgers expect him to sign with the Steelers here soon. And I do think that it would be beneficial for him to be there for Steelers OTAs. That is, if he feels like he's in the mental space to be able to commit to the Pittsburgh Steelers at this point in time. That'll be it for today's edition of Steelers Talk by Chat Sports and today's Aaron Rodgers update. I will say, guys, keep your eye on the Pat McAfee show here on Thursday and Friday. Okay, of course, I can't remember if it was a Thursday or a Friday when he went on McAfee the last time, but he has always given McAfee his scoops. Okay, he announced he was going to go to the Jets back in 2023 on McAfee. McAfee had a scoop that Devontae Adams was going to go to the Jets before he got traded there officially. So, Rodgers likes to give McAfee these scoops. So keep your eye out for the Pat McAfee show here on Thursday and Friday. I could certainly see him going on there with a surprise appearance to announce he's going to the Steelers. Could certainly see that being the case. So make sure you guys click that subscribe button if you haven't already. Really do appreciate all of your guys' support. We'll have more Aaron Rodgers updates as the week goes on here. So click that subscribe button for the very latest.